The girl. No one believed until her little brother took the stand. She didn't plan on telling anyone, but once the words left her mouth, everything changed. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. It started in a quiet room, just her and the school counselor. She hadn't even meant to say it that day. She was just tired of pretending everything was fine, tired of carrying something that felt heavier every time she stayed quiet. She sat with her hands in her lap, twisting the edge of her sleeve, and when the counselor asked if everything at home was okay, she just shook her head. Not big, not dramatic, just enough. Then she said it. What had happened, who it was, when, how long. Her voice didn't shake. She didn't cry. But she felt like her body wasn't hers anymore, like she was watching herself from somewhere else. The counselor didn't interrupt. She listened, nodded, wrote something down on a notepad, then told her she was doing the right thing. For a moment, she believed her. But after that day, things didn't get easier. They got harder. There were meetings, phone calls. A social worker came to school and asked her to repeat everything she had already said. Then someone else asked her again, and again. Each time she felt smaller. Her words stayed the same, but the looks she got started to shift. Some people avoided her. Others looked at her like they didn't know what to believe. Friends at school stopped sitting near her at lunch. A few teachers kept calling on her less. One even stopped saying hello in the morning. At home, things got quiet. Her mom didn't know what to say. Her aunt cried. Her older cousin didn't believe her at all. She kept waiting for someone to make it feel better. For someone to say, "We're with you. We believe you." But that moment never came. She had told the truth, and now it felt like no one wanted to hear it. There were nights she sat in her room with the lights off, just holding her pillow and staring at the wall. Not crying, just numb. She hadn't expected it to be easy, but she hadn't expected it to feel like this. Like telling the truth made everything worse. She didn't take it back. Not once. Even when people asked her if she was sure. Even when they said things like, "Are you remembering it right? Are you exaggerating? Maybe you misunderstood." She didn't change her story. She just started saying less. At school, she kept her head down, turned in her work, sat by the window in class, walked home alone. The only person who didn't treat her differently was her little brother. He was only 8, too young to understand everything, but old enough to know something was wrong. He didn't ask questions. He just sat beside her when she was quiet, brought her a juice box once when she skipped dinner, left a folded note on her bed that said, "I like when you read to me." He didn't say much, but he stayed close. She didn't know if anyone would ever really listen. She didn't know what would happen next. All she knew was that she had told the truth, and now she had to carry it, even if no one believed her. The first time they asked her to repeat it, she thought it would be the last. She sat in a small office at a building she didn't recognize. The walls were pale, the lights too bright. A woman with a kind face sat across from her, holding a clipboard. She asked if it was okay to talk again, asked if she remembered what she said at school. She nodded. She remembered. She had been remembering it for a long time. So she said it again, not word for word, but close, enough to make her feel the same way she had the first time. Tired, cold, like every word she gave was taking something from her. The woman wrote things down, nodded, gave her a soft smile when she was done. "You did good," she said. "We just needed to hear it again." But they didn't stop there. A week later, it was someone else. Another office. Another quiet room. She said it again. Then again. They told her it was part of the process, that they had to make sure the details were right, that they needed consistency. She wanted to ask, why does no one else have to say things over and over like this? But she didn't. She just sat there, hands in her lap, eyes on the floor, and gave the same story to another stranger. After the third time, she stopped expecting it to get easier. They started asking harder questions. What exactly did he say to you? Are you sure that's when it happened? Was anyone else around? Did he ever hurt anyone else? Each time she answered, she felt further away from herself. At home, the air got heavier. Her mom had told the family. Not everyone responded the same. One uncle stopped calling. Another told her mom it sounded complicated. Her grandmother said she'd pray about it but never brought it up again. At school, people started to whisper. She heard her name once in the hallway. Not loud. Just enough. Another girl in her class unfollowed her online. A friend who used to walk with her after 7th period stopped waiting. The worst part wasn't what they said. It was what they didn't say. The silence. The way people looked at her now like she was a problem to manage instead of a person to care about. She stayed quiet in class. Got good at pretending she didn't notice the shift. Turned in her homework on time. Avoided the lunchroom when she could. One night she sat at the kitchen table while her mom took a phone call in the next room. She didn't mean to listen, but she heard it. He said she's making it up. Said she's just confused. Her mother's voice didn't respond right away. Then came a sigh. A long one. I don't know what to believe anymore. The girl didn't move. Didn't make a sound. Just sat there, staring at the glass of water in front of her. It was the first time she let herself feel afraid. Not because of what had happened, but because maybe the truth wasn't going to be enough. She had done everything they asked, told the truth every time, and somehow it felt like she was losing more with each word. She noticed the shift before anyone said it out loud. The way conversation stopped when she walked into a room. The way her name came up in fragments, never full sentences, just pieces. Someone would say her name, then lower their voice, then change the subject. It started at home. Her mom was different now. Not angry, just distant. Always on the phone, always tired. She stopped asking how school was. She stopped asking if she was okay. Some nights she'd stay in her room with the door closed. Other nights, she'd fall asleep on the couch with the TV on. There were fewer hugs, less eye contact, and more quiet. Her aunt used to come over every Friday, bring food, talk about work, sit on the couch with her mom and laugh. But now she didn't come as often. When she did, she barely looked in her direction. Once, while putting away groceries, the girl heard her aunt whisper, "You sure this is what really happened?" Her mom didn't answer. That silence said enough. Holidays came and went. Normally they all went to Grandma's house. This year they stayed home. Too much going on, her mom said. No one talked about it, but she knew why. Some of the family didn't want her there anymore, not because of what she did, but because of what she said. They didn't say it to her face, but they didn't have to. The distance said it for them. At school, the questions stopped, not because people believed her, but because they had already made up their minds. She became the girl with the story, the girl people didn't know how to talk to anymore. One teacher started treating her differently, less patient, more clipped. When she missed an assignment, he said, "You've got a lot going on, but that doesn't mean the rules change." She nodded and didn't argue. Another teacher pulled her aside one afternoon and asked gently, "Are you still saying the same thing?" She didn't respond at first. Then she said, "It's not something I'm saying. It's something that happened." The teacher just nodded and let her go. She felt like a piece of glass people were afraid to touch, like they thought she might break, or worse, make everything else break around her. The few friends she had left started pulling back. Not in big ways, just less texting, fewer invites. One girl told her, "My mom said I shouldn't get involved." She nodded like it didn't hurt, but it did. The people who said they'd support her weren't cruel. They weren't mean. They were just quiet now, and quiet can feel worse than shouting. Her little brother still talked to her. He still sat by her on the couch, still left his socks on her bed, still asked for help with homework. He didn't know everything, but he knew enough. One night, when the house was especially still, he walked into her room without knocking. He held his stuffed dinosaur in one hand. "Are you sad?" he asked. She looked at him, surprised. "Sometimes," she said. He didn't ask why. He just climbed into the bed beside her and stayed there until he fell asleep. That night she realized something. Most people didn't believe her. Some didn't want to. Some were afraid to. But he wasn't. He was only 8. But he believed her. And for the first time in weeks, that was enough to make her breathe a little easier. He was always there, just not in the way people noticed. Her little brother had a quiet way about him. He wasn't the type to make noise or draw attention. Most days he stayed in his room with his Legos or lined up his toy cars along the edge of the coffee table. He liked routines. Cereal in the morning, cartoons after school, stories before bed. He didn't ask for much, but he saw everything. He was there the day she came home quiet and pale after her first visit to the counselor. He was sitting on the floor with his blocks, building a garage. She had walked right past him, gone to her room, and shut the door. He didn't say a word, just watched. Later, when dinner came, he asked where she was. Their mom didn't answer right away, just said, "She's tired." That became the new answer for everything. She's tired. She's resting. She's going through something. But he could tell it wasn't just that. He remembered the day the police came to the house. 2 officers, soft voices, notebooks in hand. He watched from the hallway, peeking around the corner. He wasn't supposed to hear anything, but he did. He saw the way his sister held her arms across her stomach, the way she kept her eyes on the floor, the way their mom rubbed her forehead the entire time. After they left, no one said much. No one ever explained things to him. But he picked up the pieces on his own. He started noticing how the house changed, how his mom got quieter, how the phone rang more, how they didn't go to Grandma's anymore, how his sister started eating dinner alone in her room. No one talked about why, but he kept seeing it. One night he walked into her room holding a picture he drew at school, a stick figure family standing in front of a house. He had drawn her next to him, holding his hand. She smiled and taped it to the wall beside her bed. She didn't know how much that meant to him. He didn't have the words for what had happened, but he understood what it did. He saw her cry once. Not loud, not dramatic, just sitting at the kitchen table when she thought no one was around. Her head in her hands, shoulders shaking. He didn't ask why. He just sat down across from her and waited. After a minute, she wiped her eyes and gave him half a smile. "Want a snack?" she asked. He nodded. Later that night, he drew another picture. This time, it was just the 2 of them, sitting at the table, a bag of chips between them. He left it on her pillow. He never told anyone what he saw, not because he was keeping a secret, but because no one asked him. Everyone thought he was too young to understand, that he was too far in the background to notice anything. But he noticed everything, and slowly, without trying to, he became the only person she trusted to be completely real with. She didn't have to explain things to him. She didn't have to convince him. He just believed her. And one day soon, when it mattered most, that quiet truth he carried would finally find its voice. They told her she might have to speak in court. The words didn't hit her all at once. At first, it just sounded like another meeting, another conversation. But then they explained what it meant. A real courtroom, a judge, lawyers, someone sitting across from her who would try to make her seem like she didn't know what she was talking about. Her stomach dropped. She didn't ask questions, just nodded. Her attorney was kind, gentle. She used phrases like, "when the time comes," and "we'll be right there with you." But all the support in the world didn't change what it meant. She would have to sit in a room full of strangers, say what happened, and hope, once again, that someone would finally believe her. The next few days were heavy. She couldn't sleep much, couldn't eat much either. She'd lie in bed at night and run through every word she might have to say. She wasn't scared of forgetting. She remembered everything clearly. The hard part wasn't memory. The hard part was knowing people might still choose not to listen. She went to a prep session. They brought her into a small room and walked her through what would happen. Told her about the questions they'd ask. Let her practice answering them. A counselor sat beside her and said things like, "You're doing great," even when her hands shook a little. She asked once if the person who hurt her would be in the room. They said yes. She didn't ask anything else after that. Back at home, no one talked about it. Her mom was still distant. Not mean, not cold, just tired. Like the weight of it had worn her down. Like she wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Sometimes they ate dinner in silence. Sometimes they ate separately. The TV stayed on more now, even when no one was watching. Her brother noticed. He didn't say anything directly, but he stayed close. He'd bring his toys into her room, sit at the end of her bed, ask questions about her homework. Small things. But they helped. She wondered sometimes what he knew. He was only 8. No one had explained the full story to him, but somehow he seemed to understand more than anyone else. One afternoon, a few days before the hearing, she sat on the back porch with her hands folded in her lap. The sun was low. The air felt cold. Her brother walked out and sat next to her, holding 2 juice boxes. "Do you have to go to court?" he asked quietly. She looked at him, surprised. "Yeah," she said. "I do." He didn't speak for a few seconds, just sipped from the straw. "Will they ask you what happened?" "Probably." "Will they believe you?" She looked at the ground. "I don't know." He nodded, like he understood. "I believe you," he said, his voice steady. She didn't respond right away. Her throat felt tight. She just reached out and took his hand. It was small, warm, still sticky from the juice box. That night, after he went to bed, she sat in her room and stared at the ceiling. She still wasn't sure how it would go, but one thing had changed. She wasn't going in completely alone. The courtroom was colder than she expected. The chairs were stiff, the walls bare, the whole space quieter than anything she'd ever been in. No one was shouting. No one was even talking. Just papers rustling, footsteps echoing across the floor, people moving with purpose. She sat near the back with her attorney beside her and tried to keep her breathing steady. It didn't feel like a place where something good could happen. It felt like a place where people made decisions that lasted forever. They hadn't called her name yet. That was the hardest part. Waiting. Knowing she'd have to get up in front of everyone, sit in a high-backed chair, and say things she had already said so many times before. But this time, it would be different. This time, the other side would be listening too. Not to help her, but to find ways to twist her words. Her mom sat 2 seats over. She hadn't said much on the ride there, just held the keys tight in her hand and kept her eyes on the road. The silence between them was still there, but at least she showed up. Her little brother wasn't with them. He was supposed to stay at a neighbor's house until they got back. He had given her a drawing before they left. It was the two of them standing outside the house with a dog between them. They didn't even have a dog, but that didn't matter. He'd drawn a big sun in the corner and a speech bubble above her head that said, "It's okay now." She folded it and kept it in her pocket. When her name was finally called, her stomach turned. Her attorney gave her a quick nod and stood up with her. She followed slowly. Her legs felt heavier than they should, like her body knew what was coming and wasn't sure how to carry her through it. The judge asked her name. She gave it. She was told to speak clearly, to answer what she could, to take her time. She looked straight ahead, not at the man across the room, not at the people behind him, just forward. They started with questions she already knew. What happened? When? Where? She gave the same answers, the same details. Her voice didn't shake, but her hands did. Then came the harder part, the cross-examination. A different voice now, sharper, less kind, not yelling, not cruel, just different, calculated. They asked her if she remembered things clearly, if she might have misunderstood, if she had ever made something up before. She didn't get angry. She didn't cry. She just answered. No. 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 Each time, steady. But each question felt like a small cut. They asked her why she waited, why she didn't tell someone sooner, why she didn't fight harder. She said what she had to say. She said it calmly. But in the back of her mind, a voice kept whispering, "They're not listening. They're just trying to take it apart." When she was finally allowed to step down, her legs felt weak. She sat back in the same seat and didn't speak. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her face still. The judge called for a short break. She stood up to stretch her legs, walked slowly toward the back of the room near the hallway, just to breathe for a minute. That's when she saw him, her brother, sitting quietly in a chair with one of the court staff beside him, legs swinging off the edge. He had the same jeans on from that morning, the same sneakers with the worn-out laces. She stared at him, confused. The staff member leaned down and whispered something in his ear. Then he stood up and started walking toward the courtroom. She looked back at the door, at the people filing in. It didn't make sense. He wasn't supposed to be here. But then she heard the staff say something to the judge. "There's someone else who asked to speak." The room shifted, and everything started to feel different. He looked small, walking to the front of the courtroom. His hands were tucked into the sleeves of his sweatshirt. His sneakers squeaked slightly on the floor as he followed the staff member to the witness stand. People turned their heads, confused. A few leaned in to whisper. No one had expected this. Especially her. She sat frozen in her chair, watching him climb up onto the stand. He had to sit on a cushion so he could see over the microphone. His legs dangled above the floor, swinging slowly back and forth. His face looked calm, but his eyes kept scanning the room, looking for her. When he found her, he didn't smile. He just nodded. It was quiet. No one was sure what was happening yet. The judge leaned forward and asked for his name. He gave it clearly. Then the judge asked the most important question. "Do you know why you're here?" He nodded again. "I want to say what I saw," he said. His voice was small but steady. There was a pause. One of the attorneys spoke up, trying to object. Something about age, about relevance, about whether he understood what it meant to testify. But the judge overruled it, said they'd proceed carefully. A counselor stood nearby, just in case. But he didn't need help. They asked if he knew the difference between truth and lies. He said yes. "What happens if you lie?" the judge asked gently. "You get in trouble," he answered, "and people get hurt." The judge looked satisfied. Then came the questions. No one pushed him. No one tried to trick him. They just asked. Had he ever seen anything strange? Had he heard anything that made him uncomfortable? He looked down at his lap for a moment, then back up. "One time I was walking down the hallway and I saw my sister crying," he said. "She was in her room, and the door was cracked open." The room stayed still. "Did you hear anything else?" the attorney asked. "I heard her say, 'Please stop.' She sounded scared." He wasn't making it up. That much was clear. He wasn't coached. He didn't use big words or say anything rehearsed. He just told the truth the way a child does. Straightforward. Simple. The attorney nodded, then asked, "Did you see who was with her?" He nodded again. He said the name, clearly, without hesitation. The man across the courtroom didn't move, but everyone else did. A low murmur moved through the room before the judge called for quiet. Her heart was pounding. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She'd spent so long feeling like she was the only one who knew what had happened, the only one who saw it, the only one carrying it. And now her brother, barely old enough to understand the full weight of it, was saying it out loud for the world to hear. No fear, no pause, just truth. When the questioning was over, the judge thanked him for being brave, told him he could step down. He climbed off the stand, walked back across the room, and sat down beside the court staff again. He didn't look around for approval. He didn't seem scared. He just sat quietly, hands still folded in his lap. She looked at him, and for the first time since this all began, something inside her started to loosen. Not everything was fixed. Not yet. But someone else had stood up. Someone else had spoken. And because of him, she wasn't the only voice in the room anymore. After her brother spoke, everything felt different. It wasn't that people suddenly apologized or that the truth was instantly accepted. That's not how it worked. But something shifted. A silence broke. And in its place was a kind of stillness that felt less like doubt and more like people finally paying attention. She sat in her seat, still processing what he had said. The words were simple, but the effect was not. He had said exactly what happened, what he saw, what he heard, and he didn't waver. He didn't look unsure. And most importantly, he didn't look afraid. The court recessed for the day not long after. People filed out slowly, speaking in low voices. A few glanced at her, some with sympathy, some with uncertainty. But no one was looking through her anymore. They were seeing her now, seeing all of it. Her mom didn't say anything on the way out, just walked beside her, hands clenched around the keys. But when they reached the car, she paused before getting in. "I didn't know he remembered any of that," her mom said quietly. She didn't answer right away. "He never said anything," her mom added. "He shouldn't have had to," she said. They both got in the car. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't the kind of quiet filled with doubt like before. It felt different, like a door had cracked open. Later that evening, her little brother came into her room. No words, just holding the same stuffed dinosaur he always carried when he was tired. He crawled up on the bed beside her and laid his head on the pillow. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Are you?" She looked at him for a moment. "I think I am," she said. They stayed there for a while. Nothing needed to be said. He had already said the most important thing, not just in court, but by showing her she wasn't alone. The next few days were slower. The case wasn't over yet. Decisions still had to be made. More meetings. More questions. But the tone had changed. People didn't question her the same way anymore. They didn't lean so hard on, "Are you sure?" Or, "Maybe you misremembered." Because now someone else had remembered too. Someone who had no reason to lie. Someone who had no script, no agenda. Just a truth he'd kept to himself until the moment he knew it mattered most. At school, things started to change in small ways. A teacher who had kept her distance stopped her after class and asked if she needed help catching up on an assignment. A classmate who hadn't spoken to her in weeks said hi in the hallway. It wasn't dramatic, but it was something. She didn't start talking more. She didn't pretend everything was normal. But she didn't walk with her head down anymore either. The counselor at school called her in the following week, not for questions, just to check in. "I heard about your brother," she said. "That was really brave." She nodded. "Yeah, he's always been brave. People just didn't notice." The counselor smiled. "They do now." She left the office feeling a little lighter. She had spent so long feeling like she was shouting into a locked room. Now, for the first time, she could hear someone else's voice echoing back. That changed things. Not in ways you could always see, but in ways that mattered. The case ended quietly. There wasn't a dramatic announcement, no big moment in a crowded room, just a phone call, a few sentences, then silence. Her mom stood in the kitchen holding the phone to her ear, listening without interrupting. When she hung up, she didn't say anything right away. She just looked across the room where her daughter was sitting, waiting. "They're not going forward with him anymore," her mom said. "They believe you." She didn't say anything at first. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just sat there, letting the words land. Letting the weight of everything finally begin to settle. It was over. Or at least that part was. The past hadn't disappeared. The pain hadn't vanished. But something had changed. Someone had believed her. And more than that, someone had stood beside her when it counted. Her brother was in the other room, on the floor with his cars lined up like a racetrack. She walked in and sat down beside him. He looked up, smiled, and went back to lining up the last few pieces. "They said they believe me," she said. He nodded, like he already knew. "I'm glad you told the truth," she said quietly. "I didn't want you to be the only one," he said. That stayed with her. Long after the room grew quiet, long after the paperwork was finished, long after school returned to normal and people stopped whispering in the halls. Because that's what it came down to. He didn't speak up for attention, or because someone asked him to. He did it because he knew she had been alone, and he didn't want her to carry it by herself anymore. The photo he drew of them standing under the sun with the words, "It's okay now," stayed on her wall. Not because everything was suddenly okay, but because it reminded her of how far she had come. There were still people who didn't understand. Still parts of the family who stayed quiet. Still a gap between the version of life she used to believe in and the one she now lived in. But she wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't doubted. She wasn't dismissed. She was heard. And not just because of her own voice, though that had carried her farther than she ever thought it could, but because of a boy with messy hair and a stuffed dinosaur who saw what others missed. It changed her. Not in loud ways, but in steady ones. She walked taller now, not to prove anything, but because she knew her truth had held up, even when others tried to tear it down. One evening, not long after everything was settled, her brother handed her another drawing. This one had them standing together again, only this time they were both holding microphones. She laughed a little. What are we doing here? She asked, pointing at it. You're telling your story, he said, and I'm helping.
She hung that one up too.
Because that's what it really was. Not just her story. Theirs. 2 voices, 1 truth. And in the end, that had been enough. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.